This account is regarding a soldier boy, and knowing that I'd been raised in quite a few of the Army camps, U.S. Army camps, during the building of the Alaskan Highway. Now, this was 1961, so I had not seen a U.S. Army uniform, but I in the foyer of the church, or it wasn't the church, it was the church hall in Dawson Creek, United Church Hall in Dawson Creek. And I looked through the people and I could see a staff sergeant on a tunic. And so that caught my attention. I thought, that's nice to see, you know. And then I didn't see it anymore. Then while we're in the service, we've come to the end of the service. It is Saturday evening. And Brother Branham has preached the service from that time. And we've come to the end of the service, and he begins to sing. The whole congregation begin to sing, I love him, I love him. And right in the midst of that chorus, at the first end of the chorus.
What's the matter, soldier boy? You're not going to commit suicide. The devil's lying to you, boy. You've only got a phobia. He's lying to you. He'll drive you insane if you believe him. Deny him. Renounce the devil. I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to renounce the devil and accept Jesus Christ as your healer. You'll go back and be a gentleman and a real man. Do you do it? Raise up your hands to God and say, praise God. That's right. Oh, amen. Now go back home and be well. All that believe him, raise your hands and give him praise.
The amazing thing is, I was there. I was on the platform. And so I immediately thought of this tunic that I had seen. And young people were buying, you know, army uniforms and tunics and so on, just wearing it as jackets. So I didn't know but what it was that. And so I began to look for a soldier boy, and others were looking also. There were also some Canadian soldiers that had been attending the meeting. One of them became a very, very firm believer. And we couldn't see any soldier boy at all. And when Brother Branham continues to talk to him and says, you'll go home and be a real gentleman and be a real man. Deny the devil, deny him. And so it was a startling moment, really. And the next day, we were leaving, or the following day, we were leaving early in the morning. On Monday morning. Brother Branham did not know where we were taking him. I was just taking him up the Alaskan Highway, and we were going to go about 375, 400 miles. So we drove as far as Fort Nelson, which is mile 300. And I said to Brother Branham, I said, you know, maybe we should have a bite to eat, because by the time we get up to Brother Southwick's place, which will be mile 375 at that time, I said, you know, Sister Lila will probably be done her dishes at Sister Southwick. And he said, I think that's a good idea. So we just pulled off on an access road on the left side and stopped at a little stopping place. It was like a little hotel. When the U.S. Army pushed the highway through Fort Dawson Creek and then Fort St. John, they passed the town, and then the service stations, etc., built alongside of the road. And so we stopped in there, where there was a restaurant, just a little clapboard building, probably 2 stories. And we're having we're going to have our lunch. Brother Chris Berg was with us. There was Brother Chris Berg, Brother Branham, and myself. And we sat in a booth. The waitress had come and taken our order. And just after that, the door opened, which was on the side of the building, and in came two men. And I recognized one as being the soldier boy that I'd seen in the tunic unit, the tunic uniform, I should say. And when I looked at him, I said, well, fancy seeing you here. I had been away from this area for about 1.5 years, and Brother Branham, he just looked up over his shoulder like this to see who it was I was talking to. He thought maybe perhaps one of my old friends. I don't know what he thought exactly, but just then a kind of a stout, heavier set man squeezed between him and came around and thrust his hand down towards Brother Branham and said, Brother Branham, he said, remember calling out the soldier boy? And Brother Branham was a little startled because he hadn't expected that. And he said, he looked across the table, he said, did you remember, Brother Eddie? I said, yes. You said, you'll not commit suicide, soldier boy, that's the devil talking to you. He said, yeah, that's what you said, that's what you said. And he's shaking Brother Branham's hand. He said, well, I brought him all the way from Fairbanks. And we tried to get him into a prayer line, and we weren't able to get him into a prayer line. He said, this is him. Would you pray for him? And, oh, sure. And just that moment, the waitress came and slid our soup in front of us. And so Brother Branham said, well, perhaps, and that was one of my first real shocking moments. I thought Brother Branham was going to stand and pray for him, cast that devil out of him, you know, because that was how I had been brought up. And Brother Branham said, well, maybe we'll just eat our soup first. And I thought, eat our soup, you know. Here's a soldier boy trying to commit suicide. So anyway, they said, well, that'll be fine. We need to get something to eat ourselves. And they went down 2 or 3 booths and sat in to have their dinner. And then Brother Branham entered into visions, and he just looked over my head and began to talk about what had happened in the prayer line the day before. He said, I believe there was a blind woman that came through the service yesterday. And I said, well, I can't remember a blind woman. And Brother Chris Berg spoke up. He said, yeah, I believe there was a blind woman. And Brother Branham, he's not really acknowledging our conversation. He's just looking over my head. And he said, yes. He said, let's see. Yes, he said, oh, I understand. I say now. He said, there's a young German woman that has given up her place in the prayer line to lead the blind woman through. And then he looked at me. He said, you see, Brother Eddie, it may be that she's praying right now. And he said, just a moment. And he looks away for a moment. He said, yes, she's a German woman. Just to help you believe, he said, I'll ask him and he'll give me her name. And he just looked away. He said, yes, her name is Sister Fair. In English, we would say Fear, but in German, we would say Fair. Sister Fair. And then he just moved his head for a little bit. He said, you see, perhaps she's praying just now. He said, she has a heart trouble. She has 2 or 3 organs in her body, and he named them and said she may be praying just now. I asked my father if he could find this woman, and my father found her. She was in a city quite a bit south of Dawson Creek, and it would have been about 500 miles from where we were sitting. And I just found myself in an unusual place. And now with that soldier boy in his need, Brother Branham became under that burden. So as soon as we were finished eating, we got up to pay the bill. And Brother Branham, he's standing right in front. He wouldn't let anyone pay the bill. So he's standing right in front of the cash desk, and I'm standing right beside him, and the soldier boy came in, and he's right behind him. And the soldier boy just tapped him on the shoulder. He said, "Brother Branham," he said, "just 2 minutes, just 2 minutes." "Oh, sure," he said. And the little stout fellow, we were all in a group there. And we walked out the door, and outside the door was a small sidewalk. It went down here, would be to the left as we came out, and went down to the garbage cans. And up to the right would be where the cars were parked on the gravel access road. And so I and Chris Berg and the little heavy-set fellow who drove him down went up. We went up there, but I faced myself so I could watch and see that Brother Branham, what he was doing, because I was very, very curious in my young heart. I was about 26, 27, and I'd been preaching for several years, but I was just, there was no such a thing as knowing the message yet. There's no such a thing. I had no knowledge of Malachi 4, I had no knowledge of Revelation, no knowledge of a messenger. I only knew that Brother Branham had the unique part of his ministry was the angel of the Lord that was always there. And I thought, if that angel of the Lord is in attendance at these meetings, regardless of what anyone has said about him or said about his doctrine, I would know by the presence of the angel of the Lord that he would not honor something that was not correct or true. And so as I was watching Brother Branham, I saw that he had his hat off, and I knew that he was praying. And then he slipped his hat back on, and both he and the soldier boy turned around, and they're walking very erect towards me. The soldier boy was quite a bit taller than Brother Branham. And I thought, at that instant, I thought, now this could be a very charismatic moment, and I'm not going to be swept away by the excitement or the emotion of the moment. And that's what I had just had in my heart. But the soldier boy's face was completely transformed. He was just totally relaxed, and he thrust his hand up into the air with his fist. He said, "I'm free, I'm free, I'm free." And they came up, and the soldier said to me, he said, "This man told me something that only I and my wife in this world know." He says, and when he did, it was gone. So we stepped into our cars and we said our farewells, and I guess I understand I took a picture of them, and this is a unique part of this ministry, and a unique part of my testimony is the eternal aspect of God, because here I had it on the platform. Now here we were 300 miles up the road, and all I can really say is I was there on the platform. I heard him call the soldier boy out. We have it on tape. Now I'm 300 miles away, and you have to understand where we were standing. You probably could go 1,000 or 1,500 miles north and never see a human. You could probably go at least 500, 600, 700 miles south and never see a human down the Rocky Mountain Trench from where we were. Truly a needle in a haystack. And that man had brought the soldier down for prayer from Fairbanks, Alaska, 1,523 miles on a very difficult journey. Actually believed, he said, I believed that we would find you. And the soldier boy spoke up and he said, "That is correct. This man actually believed we would find you today." And to find 2 humans or 3 humans in that part of the world is more than a needle in a haystack. It just had to be sovereign, almighty God. And now he's saying his final words. While they were down praying at the garbage cans, this heavy-set man was kind of nervously speaking. He said, he's tried to commit suicide 3 times. He's been under the care of the army doctors. And he said they can't figure out what's wrong with him. He has a lovely Christian wife and 2 beautiful children. And they just couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. When we got in our cars, Brother Branham, he just on a little access road, and it was rough. And Brother Branham said to me, he said, "Brother Eddie," he said, "you don't know this young man," or I said, "No, I don't really." He said, "He's not a good friend of yours." I said, "No, I don't know him." He said, "Not likely you'll ever see him again." And I noticed that, not likely you'll ever see him again. And I said, "No," I said, "he lives in Fairbanks, Alaska. I live in Victoria, British Columbia. Not likely we'll ever see him again." He said, "Now just to help you believe," he said, if you knew him, if he was a good friend of yours, I'd never tell you. But he said, when we got to the end of the sidewalk, he came to us there. I knew exactly what he was talking about. He came to us there and told him he had a lovely Christian wife and 2 beautiful children. I just heard that 2-3 minutes before from his friend that drove him down. And I wouldn't be telling this account to you or the world if he'd said he had a Christian wife and 3 children. But the man told me he had a lovely Christian wife and 2 children. Here's Brother Branham telling me he has a lovely Christian wife and 2 children, but he had been committing homosexual acts with young men. And as soon as he said that, he said as soon as that was uncovered, Satan lost his power. And I learned a great truth at that moment, that all Satan has to be is exposed. Once he's exposed, he's lost his power. Now here I come to a very unique part of this whole ministry. That one that was talking and speaking, he came to us there. That one who said what his problem was, that God is timeless, he's eternal. And it was 36 years later, 36 years later, a few years ago, I was in my study and I came upstairs and my daughter Marilyn, our middle daughter, her and her husband Mike had been down to Florida and had been visiting a church. And Pastor Brother Bob Brown gave Marilyn a picture and said, "Here, give this to your dad. I think it may be northern Canada and he might know something about it." So when I came upstairs from study, my wife said, "Marilyn left a picture here for you. Brother Bob Brown sent it up." So I went to the little telephone desk and I'm holding the picture. And it's the soldier boy and the man that brought him down from Fairbanks. And Brother Branham standing between them, and I took the picture. I couldn't remember taking the picture, but I was the only other person except Brother Chris Berg who wouldn't know how to handle a camera. And I was struck into silence. And my wife said, "What is it?" I couldn't seem to answer her. She said again, "What is it? What is it? What is the picture?" I said, "It's the soldier boy." I said, "I've got to call Brother Brown." So I called him and got him on the phone right away. I said, "Brother Brown, where did you get this picture?" He said, "Well, I had a young man here in the church. He was kind of he wasn't really stable. He didn't seem to be stable. He was here and then he would be drifting someplace else." I said, "Is he still there?" "No," he said, "he's not here anymore." He said, "And he was working with a construction company. They were building a mall. And some people were in there doing the floor. And this young guy, he was always wanting to witness to somebody. So he was talking to this man about Brother Branham." And he said, and the other fellow said, "Well, I've had my picture taken with him." And he brought him that picture. And Brother Branham had said to me, "Not likely you'll ever see him again." I tried to make contact with him, but I could not. I never have seen him since. Not since that day in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. And so I begin to realize the timelessness and how an event will happen, but it's not just a single event. It just keeps unfolding and unfolding because it's an eternal God. And that is the story of the soldier boy. On Sunday, which was the next day after the soldier boy had been called out, I was once again on the platform, and they had a prayer line. And in that prayer line came a woman, well known to us. She was a very dear friend of my parents. And I knew her very well. Her name was Sister Klunt. Her husband, they didn't have any children that I know of. Her husband was a very stout man, and I don't know what he actually did for a living, but I believe he worked in the agricultural department from what we have found out since. And so she came up and she just standing, and Brother Branham says, "Now here is a lady," and he begins to speak. And he said, "You're very nervous." He said, "And you have other complications, other problems. You have, I think, a spiritual problem as well." And he begins to talk to her. He said, "Yes, you are very nervous." He said, "I see you standing by a window when the sun was setting, and you're rubbing your hands." And then he stops and he's speaking to her, but he's also speaking to the congregation, speaking to people like myself. He's saying now, and it means so much to us now. He said, now, who could do that? What man could tell you where you were standing and what you were praying? And he said, and then you prayed that God would help you to get a prayer card. And when that prayer card was given to you, you were so happy, very happy that you'd received a prayer card. And he asked, you know, how could a man know that? He wanted the people to see that that was God and the prophet ministry, for a prophet is a spokesman for God. It was not just a gift of discernment. It was not that. But a lot of my friends tended to believe that it was just maybe a gift of a word of knowledge or something. It wasn't that. He was in both worlds. He was in another dimension. And he told her where she was standing, what her prayer was, and her reaction when she got the prayer card. And then he said, now he said, we'll just talk to the lady. And he said, you have something else. Now this is what was so striking to me. He said, you have something else that's on your heart. You're praying for a friend, a man that's dying with cancer. And they do not live, and I noticed he said, they do not live, because it was him and his wife. He said, they do not live here. They live in Fort St. John. And I knew Fort St. John was just 50 miles up the Alaskan Highway. What Brother Branham did not know is we were going up the highway. I was taking him early the next morning, Monday morning, up the highway. And Brother Branham was preaching on, show us the Father. I thought it was so remarkable. He was actually showing the people the Father. He said, who could tell you where you were standing when you prayed? No one but Almighty God. And that you're praying for a friend. And he said he's dying with cancer. Yes, he said he's a sinner. And he's dying with cancer. He mentioned it twice. And he said, only believe, just believe. That seemed to be the key. He said, take that handkerchief that you have and give it to him, and he'll be well. I guess she never did get it to him. This was the end of May. He passed away July the 6th, 1961. But of course, I didn't know that. We found that out many years later. But the next day, I'm in the car, and you have to understand, I had a lot of questions about Brother Branham, about his doctrine, about his ministry, but there was one thing that I knew. That is, the angel of the Lord was in attendance with him at the platform. And now we were having just a profound effect upon me and other ministers. And he said, as we drove down the highway, we started coming to the town of Fort St. John, which laid up to the right hand of the highway. And there was an entrance into Fort St. John. When the U.S. Army cut just through the farmland, the farmhouse was just up to the right, maybe 100, 150 yards. And I had noticed that house so many times in my youth and childhood, and just a big old white farmhouse. And as Brother Branham, he slowed down for the speed limit and was just driving slowly, he said, there was a woman that came in the prayer line yesterday praying for a man from Fort St. John. Oh, I said, Brother Branham, she's a very good friend of my parents. her name is Sister Clunt, and I know her well. And I knew her. I was there on the platform, and she was standing there, and he was telling her these things. Now here we are driving, and the house is just over here to my right. And he said, he's just serious. He was in a different frame of mind, you'd say. And he just said, as we were driving past, the house was going by. So he swung his arm this way and pointed behind my head. He said, "The man is in that house?" Well, I was shocked. I was startled, but I didn't know that the man was in that house. I didn't know his name or anything. And we continued on the road up to Fort Nelson and beyond up to Brother Bud Southwick's place. Brother Bud Southwick was just a new Christian. He had been saved in my church about a year before. I was so anxious to acquaint him with spiritual things. He was just, he raised horses, and he rode in rodeos and things. And so he didn't know anything. He didn't know Genesis from Revelation. He just didn't know the Bible. So I wanted to acquaint him with what a prophet was. I said, when we went by that house, I said, Brother Branham pointed to it and said, "The man is in that house." I said, "You know Sister Clunt? She was on the platform praying for him." And Brother Southwick, my friend, he said, "Oh, I know him. His name is Ed Thomas. I've known him ever since I've been about 8 years old." And so now I had it on the platform, on the highway, and with Brother Southwick. This was all within 24 hours. It was like just a divine intervention of God saying, "I will cause you to believe. I will bring it right in front of you. I will bring it." It was so arranged, I just could not doubt it. I guess it was the grace of God to me that was anchoring my faith, and I just couldn't. There was one day and the next day and the next day. And I do not know whether it was in that particular service where Brother Branham spoke, and all of the service was not taped apparently. But anyway, I was standing, and I'll never forget this. I was standing on the platform. Right beside me, on my right-hand side, was standing Brother Paul Cornish, the pastor in the church in Grand Prairie. And he was just standing there. He was taller than I was. He was very dignified, very scholarly, and a man that didn't show a lot of emotion, but he was standing there, and Brother Branham was not facing us. He had his back to us, and the prayer line was going down the wall this time and up this way. And while we were just standing there, Brother Branham, I can't explain this. This is so strange. But he just lifted his head this way and cried out, "The boy'll be all right." And a force went by me. It was like a wind, but it wasn't a wind. It was just a power, a force. Just went by me, but I was conscious of it. And I was bewildered. I don't know what's happening. The boy'll be all right. And Paul Cornish, Brother Paul Cornish, collapses over and is in convulsing tears. And I don't know what's happening. Here the voice, the force is so unusual while he's just talking to somebody in front of him. And here's Brother Paul Cornish. What do you do when somebody's, crying and convulsing? I didn't know whether to pray with him or what to do. Then he straightened up after he collected himself. He nudged me and he said, "Brother Eddie, He said, you see down the prayer line towards the end? He said, young lad that's standing there? He said, that's my son. And he's up for a serious operation next week. And to have those kind of things, I just became aware of another realm. I became aware of another place, another dimension. This man was not just ministering to the people, but it was like he was in contact with another world. The boy'll be all right, and he just continues on. And I don't know anything of the lad, or what happened after that, but that was just a very, very strange and very unusual event for me. I was in my home in Victoria, British Columbia, when I received a phone call from Brother Branham, and he was saying that I believe we're going to have a good hunt. Brother Eddie, we're going to have a good hunt. I had a dream or a vision, and he began to tell me a little bit about it, and said that he would give me the full details when we met. So when we met in Dawson Creek, he said, I had this dream or vision. He said, if it was a vision, it'll happen exactly like that. And in the vision, he said there were 2 or 3 small fellows on the hunt. I had arranged the hunt, and there was only 3 of us, including Brother Branham, Brother Bud Southwick, Brother Branham, and myself. We were the 3. Brother Southwick's son, Blaine, was not able to go on the hunt because he was in the far north in the Arctic on a survey crew and would not be able to be back for the hunt. Well, so I thought, well, maybe it was just a dream, I don't know. But Brother Branham said, I saw this large animal, and its horns kind of went back on its head. And I said, oh, that may be a caribou. He said, well, I don't know, I haven't seen a caribou before. But he said this was a dark chocolate brown animal. I said, no. I said, caribou are like battleship gray. And he said, well, no, this was chocolate brown. And he wouldn't stray from that description at all. It was a dark chocolate brown animal. So then he said, there was, in this vision or dream, I saw one of the young men. His hands were like this, he said, and they were spread out. He said there was no hair on the arms, on the hands. He said, I would say, and he kind of stopped like that and looked up. He said, probably about 18 years old. Now, I would like to encourage the viewers to be real attentive to the details, because this vision was 6 hours in the fulfillment. And he said one of my buddies was in a green checkered shirt. Well, I had a green checkered shirt, and I had told my wife to, before the hunt, I said, just throw that away because it had been torn and sewn several times around here on the pocket.
My husband was going hunting. He had this pretty good shirt, green checkered shirt, but it was torn around the pocket, and I had mended it several times. And he said, go and get me another shirt. It was a nice shirt, doeskin, soft, nice hunting shirt. And I said, okay. But I just didn't have time. I didn't have a car. I had the little girls. You have to take a bus into town. So I mended it again, the best I could. And I put it into his duffel bag. And away he went.
When we got up to Dawson Creek, I asked Brother Branham if he would tell the vision to my father. So he related the whole vision, that this dark chocolate brown animal, and he had gotten that animal and had gotten another, a grizzly bear at the same time. And for me, that was a shock. I thought, I had lived in the North. I had never gotten a grizzly bear myself. And I thought that was outstanding. And then we journeyed on the way up the Alaskan Highway to Brother Bud Southwick's place. And when we drove into the yard, here all the children came out, and including Blaine, his son, who was supposed to be in the Arctic. And I said, well, you're Blaine, I thought you were away up and you wouldn't be able to go on this hunt. Well, he said he just came back a couple of days ago. And I asked Brother Southwick, will Blaine be able to come on the hunt? Well, yeah, he thought he better come on the hunt with us. So suddenly now, I saw that we were 2 or 3 little fellows on the trip. And Blaine was fixing a little harness on the side of one of the buildings. And I was standing there with him, just the 2 of us, and I asked him, I said, Blaine, how old are you? He said, 18, why? I said, well, I was just curious to know. Now we had a young fellow, and he was 18 years old, and myself, and when Brother Branham was giving the vision, I asked him to tell Brother Southwick and his family at the supper table, tell them about the vision. So he got to the dark chocolate brown animal. I said, Brother Bud, I always thought that caribou was a dark battleship gray. Well, he said, you know, that is strange. He said, every caribou that I've seen on the north side of the highway, the Alaskan highway, has been a kind of a battleship gray, and he used the same words. He said, and they are a bush caribou. And all the caribou on the south side and the west of the highway has been mountain caribou, and they're kind of a dark chocolate brown color. And I said, well, where are we going? He said, well, we're going on the south side of the highway. So things were coming together, and there was more weight to it being a vision than it being a dream. And the only thing was a young man with a chocolate or with a checkered shirt. And when we got up to make our camp, we made our camp, and way down the valley, it would be to my right, we saw that on the skyline, there were a few caribou and some mountain sheep. And so Brother Southwick said, well, tomorrow I think that we should probably go up there. It was probably 2 or 3 miles. And so the next day, we made our way up there, and we got up on the ridge, and we ran into a few caribou and they scattered, and one ran down this way, and so I went on we all split up. And Blaine went one direction, and Brother Branham and Bud went another direction, and I went one direction, and I found a young caribou, and I was needing meat, and I shot that caribou, and it was just dark chocolate brown. And so Blaine came by, and we dressed that caribou out, and then we went back and met together, and then we climbed up on a mountain ridge. And Brother Branham said, in this vision, there was a great panoramic, and he moved his arm this way. And he said, on this great panoramic, and then he says, my friend in the checkered shirt was way down this way towards camp, and camp was 2-3 miles this direction. And he said he was waiting there, and on the way there, he said, I got this large caribou, dark chocolate brown, and he said on the way then we saw a grizzly bear on the mountain, and God gave me that animal in one shot. And I was just kind of speechless. And then while the vision was being fulfilled, we sat on this ridge, and I just looked at this beautiful panoramic. I can say that I wasn't really conscious of every detail of the vision, but it was just, we were caught up in the beauty of the moment, and the great mountain peaks on this side, on the left side, and spurring off onto ridges, and we ate our lunch on this one ridge, and Brother Branham said, what is that over there, Brother Bud? And he took his binoculars. There was 2 great caribou animals, bulls, laying on a mountain glacier. I think laying on a glacier because there's less bugs, and it's very nice and cool. And they were laying there and kind of sleeping, I think. And so Brother Bud laid out a plan. He said, well, Blaine, he said, why don't you take Brother Eddie and take the horses and go and get his meat, and then journey down this way to this dry creek bed and wait for us, and we'll come down and meet you. So I suggested that we wait till we see if they got this animal, which in about another half hour they did, and came up over the ridge and got this large caribou bull animal. And so then we went and got my meat, and we journeyed down here to this dry creek bed towards camp. What was strange that morning, when we had just left the tent, I fell into a creek, and I got my clothes wet. And I said to the brothers, just wait here and I will run home. I'll run back to the tent, which was a very short distance. And I opened up my duffel bag, and there was this green checkered shirt.
And when you got up hunting and had that little mishap in the water and had to go back to the tent and open up his bag, and there was the green checkered shirt. And he said, I told Ruth to get me a new shirt, and she didn't do it. But I didn't know that it was all a part of the vision. You just do things without even thinking that there's anything spiritual tied to it.
And I put it on, and that's the shirt I had. I had a green checkered shirt. The vision and all of the details, just, it was not in my mind whatsoever. I was cold and wet, and I changed, and then I ran up to catch up with the other brothers, and away we went. So when we went down to this dry creek bed, I had on that checkered shirt. We waited, Blaine and I, we waited for about half an hour to an hour, and Blaine said, if they're not here in about another half hour, he said, I'm going to go and find them. And in the vision, I was alone waiting for them. In another half hour, they still weren't there. He said, so I'm going to go and see if I can meet up with them, because we didn't know what had happened. We didn't know whether we missed them somehow or whatever. So he leaves, and now I'm waiting alone. And I was waiting about another half hour. And then I heard some voices, and I just took a few steps to the trail, and here came Brother Bud carrying this big caribou on his head, on his shoulders rather.
We come all the way down that creek bottom packing that caribou cape in the head, you know, and he kept watching for this grizzly. Well, you know, it was like looking on the side of that hill up there, only one that bush on it, you know, just that short grass. There was just no bear there, that's all. And all at once, well, we getting pretty near to where you guys was, and I'd give it up, really, of seeing a grizzly. You know, and finally, we were sitting down resting again, and he pointed up there on the side of the hill, and he said, what's that up there? Well, he knew what it was. I didn't. As soon as I glimpsed up there, I knew it was a bear. So I said, you know, and it was a silver tip, and it was about the same color as an old roan milk cow that I had. And I said, man, old mister looks like my old milk cow. Yeah. Up we went. When he said he would shoot it, you know, to me it was like him shooting from here up to the top of that cliff up there, or better than that. I had no idea he would shoot that far, and I wouldn't have let anybody else shoot that far anyway. You know, they could have crippled something or and all, but we had no time to go around and come up from the back of that mountain. It took us a day. And so I said to him, I said, we'll have to let that bear go tonight and come back after him tomorrow, because we can't get any closer this way. He's looking right down at us. And, oh, he said, I can kill him from here, he said. I doubted that, really, because I hadn't seen him, you know, shoot that much. That caribou was right on top of that when he shot that. Boy, when he shot, that old bear just was coming. He pulled that gun up and it snapped. Man, my hair stood right up.
That was after the first shot.
Yeah. That bear was coming. He fell. Oh, for that big poplar over there from us, like and right even with us like that too. He fell in that short chain thing there. So I said, you watch him and I'll go over and see how dead he is. So he did. But he was dead as could be. He fell real neat. And another thing he said that it's going to be too late. We wouldn't skin that bear out that night. Well, I never dreamt of, you know, leaving a trophy overnight. Another old bear could have come along and tore that all to pieces, but that's the first thing we thought about, you know, leave it till tomorrow. Every word that he said come just as true could be the past. You know, and you never even thought about it at the time, but you get thinking of it afterwards.
I ran up to Brother Branham. Brother Branham was standing there. I put my hand out to shake his hand. I said, congratulations, Brother Branham. That's a lovely animal. And he said, I got a bear too. And I just tapped him on the shoulder. I said, oh, you didn't get a bear the same day? He said, yeah, I did. And I felt strange. I said, well, where is it? And Bud said, well, we're not able to carry it. He said, the hide would probably weigh 300 pounds. And I said, well, and I felt real strange. And Bud walked over to his saddle horse, which was right there, and went into the saddle bag and brought out a little round tape with a push button on the side. And I was kind of amused. I had lived in the wilderness all my life and had hunted and never saw anybody carry a tape. And then I thought, well, he's a guide now. Probably he's interested in, you know, the size of the horns, etc. And he brought out this little steel tape and he put it right down at the base of the horns. There's a little ridge there. And he hooked the tape there, and then the tape went into this curve and then around. And every time he started to go around, the bottom flicked out. And then so he started it again and followed it around, trying to measure it correctly, and it flicked out. About the third time, he says to his son, Blaine, hold that tape in there. And so Blaine knelt down on one knee and spread his hands out. 18-year-old boy. And then I began to feel real strange. Held his hands out, and Brother Bud pulled the tape around. And Brother Branham said in the vision, he just heard a voice saying, it's 42 inches. And that was it. And I put my head, Blaine looked up while he was holding the tape. Brother Bud, he held his head over the tape to make sure where the black line and the black line of 42 inches fell at the last point of the horn. And he said, it's 42 inches. And I just felt overwhelmed. And Brother Branham, he did not look. He just stood there erect. And I was right on his shoulder. And he just said, there it is. It was all over. And the grizzly was laying up on the mountain. And there the horn was. And the vision was over. That took about 6 hours in total for the whole vision. A dark chocolate brown animal. And I'm standing there in a green checkered shirt. And the vision was completely fulfilled. And I can say to all who hear, this is a true report. Everything is true, absolutely true.